Right now, lawyers for a Maryland father who was deported to El Salvador are in federal court trying to get him returned to the United States. Kilmar Abrego Garcia has protected legal status, and the Trump administration admits in a court filing that it mistakenly deported him to a notorious El Salvadoran prison through what it calls an administrative error. Ahead of today's hearing, his wife, an American citizen, had a message for him.
Kilmar, if you can hear me, I miss you so much. And I'm doing the best to fight for you and our children. We're still waiting for that call that we were promised. And I'm still holding to hope until I hear your voice again.
Joining me now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Christy Greenberg is a former federal prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. We are following, as we often do in these court cases, notes that are sent to us from inside the courtroom. Lisa, one of the things that struck me was the lawyer for the Maryland man saying there is no such thing as a removal order to nowhere. He is removable to many countries on earth. El Salvador is simply not one of them. Give us the legal background on this case.
So Christy and I were just talking about this exact issue right before we came on to set. This man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, has what's called a withholding of an order of removal, meaning a judge had already determined that he was deportable from the country, but that withholding order says because he fears retaliation and because he has legitimate reasons to fear that based on past persecution, he cannot be returned to El Salvador, which is his home country. But to your point, can he be deported to another country? He sure can. And that's a question that I've been asked by many of our colleagues in the last several days. Can somebody who is not a U.S. citizen be deported to a country not of their origin? And the answer to that is yes. Within the meaning of U.S. law, they can be.
So, Christy, the Trump administration claims American courts do not have jurisdiction to seek Garcia's release from El Salvador. Here's how his lawyer reacted to that claim.
Honestly, I expect that if we made a good faith ask to the government of El Salvador, I think there's a high likelihood that the government of El Salvador would actually accede to that request. It's amazing to me that they haven't even so much as picked up the phone to just ask for this man back.
So if this was all a mistake, why can't the American government get him returned, and what recourse does the family have?
So the government's argument is, well, he's not in U.S. custody anymore, therefore there's nothing we can do. But as the plaintiff's lawyer has said, you haven't even shown that you've tried anything. El Salvador is a friendly country to the United States with this matter. We are paying $6 million to this El Salvadoran government to house these individuals. So it seems that there are many things at a minimum they could do. They could ask, hey, can you give this person back to us? By the way, there were a number of other people who were returned to the United States. For example, a number of women, because the prison said we're not going to accept women. So it is possible to return people. They just haven't asked because the government is just taking the position that we shouldn't. And in this hearing, the judge takes up this issue and says, yes, this is something a district court has jurisdiction to look at. If a deportation order is unlawful, that is precisely something a district court can look at and has jurisdiction to look at. So I do think that this is something that the court will ultimately be able to issue an order on. And what that looks like logistically, I think is kind of tough. But certainly the judge could say, have you exhausted all remedies to at least try?
So attorneys for the plaintiff are done. The DOJ lawyer is up, and they are just getting started. We touched on their argument, but what are you watching for? Does there need to be an explanation, for example, to say, here's why we can't just say, and I think this is what the plaintiff's lawyer is asking for. We can't just not pay them the $6 million, or maybe they've already paid them the $6 million.
Well, it's funny because they're not asking for the return of the $6 million or for all of the payment to stop. If you read their application really closely, All they're asking is that an order be entered that stops any payment for the detention of Mr. Abrego Garcia. And that's not a whole lot of money if you think about the totality of people who have been deported to El Salvador. But Chris, I want to go back to something that you're saying. Why would the Department of Justice not be willing to pick up the phone? Because it's a concession that once somebody has been removed to and placed in El Salvador in custody, that they can do something about it. And that is an argument that they don't want to concede in other ongoing legal proceedings, including that class-wide action in front of Judge Boasberg. They don't want to concede that they have the power to reverse any of this with respect to one man, Mr. Abrego Garcia, because if they can reverse it for him, can't they reverse it for everybody?
Well, it's going to be interesting, and I know you both are going to follow this for us as we continue to hear more.